Welcome to our noon edition of Arirang News. Here are the stories making the headlines at this hour. Today is the deadline the government has set for junior doctors to return to work in order to avoid any legal repercussions. But the majority of them haven't showed up. Officials are taking more steps to find a middle ground, such as increasing the number of medicine professors at national universities by 1,000 in 3 years' time. The foreign ministers of South Korea and the U.S. have met in Washington, looking for ways to better respond to North Korea's evolving threats. Wednesday's bilateral talks are the first since Seoul's top diplomat, Cho took up his post last month. European countries are eyeing a chance to reopen their embassies in the North Korean capital of Pyongyang. Many closed their offices during the pandemic because the reclusive regime closed off borders, making it difficult for foreign countries to rotate their staff or ship supplies. Today is the last chance doctors can return to their patients without being legally penalized for their 2-week walkout. The government has been reaching out to junior doctors by visiting their homes and even offering a sit-down to find some middle ground. Shin Se-byung starts us off.
Thursday marks the return-to-work deadline set by the government for doctors protesting the planned medical school quota increase. The government has called on doctors to resume work by February 29th, stating that those who comply will not face any legal penalties. In a final step that would allow the government to file a criminal complaint over the collective action, Health Ministry officials visited the homes of trainee doctors in person on Wednesday to deliver return-to-work orders. Previously, these orders had been issued through mail or text messages. Those who do not return to work by today will face suspension of their medical licenses or additional legal action. South Korea's medical law stipulates that doctors and other medical personnel who fail to respond to return-to-work orders can face up to 3 years in prison. The Health Ministry plans to begin tallying the number of trainee doctors who do not return to work next Monday, the first working day after the Thursday deadline, with Friday a national holiday in South Korea. The ministry is then expected to file a complaint with the police, officially initiating legal procedures. The police are expected to issue arrest warrants for those who fail to respond to a summons without reasonable cause. Amid rising tensions between doctors and the government, some residents are now making moves to return to their posts. At Konkuk University Hospital in Seoul, 12 out of approximately 200 trainee doctors returned as of February 26th. At Cheonnam National University Hospital, 7 out of around 120 residents who were ordered to resume work returned to their post last week, and Chosun University Hospital has seen 7 out of 113 residents come back. Meanwhile, the Health Ministry has scheduled a discussion at 4 p.m. on Thursday in Seoul. The second Vice Minister of Health and Welfare, Bang Min-soo, has reached out to the resigning resident doctors, inviting them for a dialogue. Despite multiple public invitations, Park has yet to secure successful dialogue. He has clarified that the meeting is open not just to the representatives from the Korean Intern and Resident Association, but also to any resident doctor eager to join the conversation. Shin Se-byung, Arirang News.
Another pressing concern for the South Korean government is the evolving threats of its neighbor, North Korea. To discuss rising tensions on the peninsula, top diplomats of South Korea and the U.S. met in Washington on Wednesday. There, they discussed the importance of bilateral as well as trilateral cooperation with Japan to better respond to any security threats. Pyongyang has the latest.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho met with his American counterpart Antony Blinken in Washington on Wednesday local time and discussed ways to cooperate in order to better respond to evolving North Korean threats. The hour-long meeting was their first bilateral sit-down since Cho took office last month. This comes amid concerns about North Korea's military cooperation with Russia and speculations that the regime could engage in more provocations ahead of parliamentary elections in South Korea in April and the U.S. presidential election in November.
We are one in condemning North Korea's increasingly provocative rhetoric and actions that violate multiple UN Security Council resolutions, including its export of munitions and ballistic missiles to Russia.
While noting that South Korea and the U.S. have always moved in lockstep, Cho highlighted that strengthening their trilateral coordination with Japan is essential for addressing common security challenges and promoting stability in the Indo-Pacific region. On global issues, he added that South Korea continues to stand together in supporting Ukraine and that it's also united in condemning Houthi attacks. Blinken, who will be visiting Seoul next month, said he's very much looking forward to being in South Korea and said the two countries' partnership is stronger than it's ever been.
We're working together on virtually every major challenge that we have to contend with around the world, as well as working together to build even greater opportunities for our people here in the United States and in South Korea.
Seoul's foreign ministry said the two sides also agreed to strengthen diplomatic efforts to cut off the sources of North Korea's illicit funding activities and revive interest in North Korean defectors, detainees, and prisoners of war. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
In early 2020, all European nations with embassies in Pyongyang had to withdraw from their posts as the North imposed some of the world's strictest pandemic measures, including near-total travel bans and closing off its borders. But now, several European countries like the UK and Sweden are preparing to reopen their embassies now that North Korea started easing international restrictions. Lee Seung-jae has the details.
In January 2020, North Korea began closing up its border in a bid to prevent the COVID-19 virus from spreading in its own country. Having one of the world's strictest border controls at the time, all European nations withdrew from their embassies in Pyongyang. However, 4 years on from their departure, a number of European embassies in the North Korean capital will reopen in the near future. According to a Reuters report on Wednesday, Britain's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office is discussing plans with the North Korean embassy in London for a technical and diplomatic delegation to visit Pyongyang. A spokesperson from the Foreign Office said it welcomes the return of some diplomats to Pyongyang and North Korea's move to reopen its borders, adding that it asked North Korea to allow entry for the international community, including all diplomats, UN agencies, and non-governmental humanitarian organizations. Sweden's special envoy for the Korean Peninsula, Peter Samneby, said there had been some progress regarding his return to Pyongyang. The return of North Korean diplomats to their overseas posts has also been a slow and gradual process. Last August, the regime cautiously began sending their ambassadors to pro-North Korean countries such as China, Russia, Mongolia, and Cuba. Other European nations are beginning the process of returning diplomats to Pyongyang, as the German Foreign Ministry said that it will begin inspecting their embassy, which had been left vacant for years before its ambassador returns. The Swiss Foreign Ministry is also discussing a visit to North Korea to resume humanitarian projects by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. Switzerland has been conducting support projects for North Korea with the Development Cooperation Office in Pyongyang since 1997, which it withdrew from in March 2020. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korean households saw their real income go up in the fourth quarter. Data released by Statistics Korea on Thursday shows that the average income per household came to 5.2 million won, or around $3,700 a month. That's a nearly 4% rise compared to the fourth quarter of the previous year. And the average real income per household, once adjusted for inflation, was up by 0.5%. That is the second consecutive on-year increase in real household income. The agency attributed this to an overall rise in employment and public pension benefits. President Yoon Suk-yeol pledged support for building a digital tech ecosystem between South Korean firms and Meta as he met with the firm's CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, on Thursday morning. Yoon's policy secretary, Song Tae-yoon, said that the meeting took place for roughly half an hour at the Yongsan presidential office, with the discussion mostly focusing on future tech cooperation in cutting-edge areas like artificial intelligence and high-performance chips. As the use of AI continues to proliferate in diverse areas of digital technology, Yoon said South Korea is prepared to back cooperation between Meta and local firms. Emphasizing South Korea's dominant position in the global memory chip market, Samsung Electronics' expansion in foundries, as well as crucial hardware technologies for metaverse platforms, Yoon said they can play a crucial role in forming an open, innovative ecosystem with global big tech firms and various governments. We are seeing generative AI tech evolve day by day, and Korean researchers are making big advances. A group of researchers in the countries developed the world's fastest generative AI that can create images for a given sentence within 2 seconds. Kim Da-mi walks us through.
Researchers input a sentence into the system. After entering a sentence that reads, "A realistic photo of an astronaut reading a book on Mars under the moon," 2 seconds later, the Koala 700M developed in South Korea is the first to come up with an image. Following that, Carlo, made by Kakao Brain, took 3.6 seconds to come up with an image, while DALL-E 2 and DALL-E 3, developed by OpenAI, took over 10 seconds each. Among generative AIs that convert text descriptions into images, Koala 700M is the fastest in the world. High speed is achieved by the development of a knowledge distillation technology, which transfers knowledge from a large model to a smaller model without loss of validity.
Existing technologies can generate high-quality images but are slow. However, Koala has developed technology to generate images more quickly by lightweighting the large neural network model.
The researchers have also developed a model that incorporates a visual intelligence technology into conversational AI. Named Kolava, it allows AI and humans to ask and answer questions about images or videos.
We plan to continue our research focusing not only on the technology of generating images from text, but also on the field of video generation.
The research team plans to expand the utility of the knowledge distillation technology, proven effective in image generation, to other areas, and develop a leading artificial intelligence. 김다미, 아리랑 뉴스.
For the first time since the war against Russia broke out, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy visited the Balkans, asking for military support from the region's leaders. Zelenskyy has been asking for more international support as the war is heading into its third year. At the European Parliament, EU President Ursula von der Leyen proposed using profits from frozen Russian assets to better support Ukraine. Yoon reports.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has been traveling around the world to drum up support for Ukraine to improve defensive capabilities against Russia at a time of faltering military support from Western allies. Zelenskyy was in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday to push for a peace plan and the return of prisoners of war from Russia, which was followed by a 2-day summit of 11 countries from southeastern Europe, along with officials from the European Union and other international organizations. Speaking at the Ukraine Southeast Europe Summit held in Albania on Wednesday, Zelenskyy said the low ammunition supply is affecting the situation on the battlefield and called on leaders of Balkan countries for help. He also proposed holding a Ukraine-Balkan Defense Forum to strengthen arms cooperation. Albania was among the first countries to offer shelter to Ukrainian refugees and continues to voice full support for Ukraine. It has provided military assistance in the form of ammunition and training for the Ukrainian military. But Ukraine did not receive full support for its war against Russia at the meeting. Kremlin ally Serbia has refused to align with EU sanctions following Russia's invasion and continues to sign cooperation agreements with Moscow. Meanwhile, at the European Parliament in Strasbourg on Wednesday, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen proposed that the European Union consider using profits from frozen Russian assets to buy military supplies for Ukraine. She urged the EU to do more on defense policy, adding that the threat of war for the EU may not be imminent, but it is not impossible.
It is time to start a conversation about using the windfall profits of frozen Russian assets to jointly purchase military equipment for Ukraine. There could be no stronger symbol and no greater use for that money than to make Ukraine and all of Europe a safer place to live.
Billions of euros worth of Russian assets are being held in Europe. Belgium has estimated the figure to be around $195 billion worth. And Prime Minister Alexander De Croo has said that he wants to use all the interest on those funds for Ukraine's reconstruction. 이은진, 아리랑 뉴스.
U.S. President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump seem to be most likely the two front-runners in the upcoming presidential election in November. Both of them won their respective primaries in Michigan on Tuesday, and Tominja explains how we can read into this.
U.S. President Joe Biden and Donald Trump won their respective primaries in Michigan on Tuesday. Results from the primaries so far indicate that the two are on course to face off in November's presidential election. Early results from Michigan, however, revealed some of their biggest political vulnerabilities and concerns. Mr. Trump has now swept the first 5 states on the Republican primary calendar, but there have been signs of struggles with some influential voter blocs that have favored former United Nations Ambassador Nikki Haley in previous contests. Ms. Haley's strongest performances on Tuesday night came in areas with college towns like Ann Arbor, home to the University of Michigan, and suburbs around Detroit. Mr. Trump, meanwhile, has underperformed with suburban voters and people with college degrees and faces a faction within his own party that believes he broke the law in one or more of the criminal cases against him. President Biden's victory in the Democratic primary also came with a warning as an uncommitted campaign organized by activists disillusioned with his handling of the war in Gaza made an impact. Michigan has the largest concentration of Arab Americans in the United States. In a statement, Mr. Biden did not directly acknowledge the uncommitted effort, but praised the progress his administration has made with Michigan voters. Despite a recent tweak in rhetoric and a call for a pause in fighting, Biden and his team have stood by Israel's right to defend itself. Meanwhile, according to the Hamas-led health ministry, the death toll in Gaza is at nearly 30,000, mostly women and children. As the civilian death toll continues to rise, so too has the pressure on President Biden to publicly push for a ceasefire. 정은주, Arirang News.
Almost 3,000 fires were recorded in the Brazilian Amazon in February. The country's National Institute for Space Research said on Wednesday that this is the highest number of fires recorded for the month of February since records began in 1999. The northern region of the rainforest faced the most severe impact, especially in the state of Roraima, home to the Yanomami indigenous group. According to AFP, experts say such an abnormal number of fires is partly down to climate change. Experts also suggest that forest clearing for agriculture might have played a role. Last year, the Brazilian Amazon was devastated by wildfires due to a severe drought between June and November. On to the entertainment front. The debut film by Korean-Canadian director Celine, Past Lives, is set to hit theaters in Korea next week. Ahead of its premiere, the director herself visited Korea to talk about her work. Our culture correspondent Song Yujin tells us more.
Celine didn't expect her movie to become this huge until about a year ago. 2023 was a stellar year for the Korean-Canadian director's debut film, Past Lives. Starring Greta Lee and Yoo Tae-oh, the film has clinched over 70 awards at numerous film festivals and is now setting its sights on the Oscars next month. Past Lives has earned 2 nominations, Best Picture and Best Original Screenplay. It all started when Song was drinking at a bar in New York with her husband and childhood friend.
None of them spoke each other's language, so I had to act as an interpreter. In the process, I got this special feeling that I was interpreting 2 sides of my identity, history, and personal narrative.
The film follows Nora, a playwright living in New York, as she reunites with her childhood sweetheart, Hae-sung, after 24 years following her emigration to Canada. This is where the concept of 인연, meaning destiny or fate in Korean, comes in. Even though the two are not together in this life, they believe their decades-long connection extends from their past lives and will continue into their next lives.
I believe 인연 is the only word that can describe the relationship between Hae-sung and Nora. While it's a Korean term, the emotion it signifies resonates universally. That's why people, regardless of their background, have shared with me that they understood its meaning after watching the film.
When I first read this scenario, I was touched by how it eloquently and simply explained what 인연 is.
Song weaved autobiographical elements into the film, drawing from her decade-long experience as a playwright, meeting her husband at an artist residency, and navigating the complexities of balancing multiple cultures. There is a reason for this.
I believe a personal story is essential when reaching out to an audience. If I want to make my creation meaningful to others, I believe I should delve into something only I can uniquely contribute or excel in.
Past Lives premieres in Korea on March 6th. Song Yujin, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. In Texas, a wildfire known as the Smokehouse Creek Fire, now the second largest in Texas history and the worst in 36 years, continues to burn through the Texas Panhandle region since starting on Monday afternoon. As of Wednesday, the fire has burned at least 850,000 acres of land and is 3% contained, according to the Texas A&M Forest Service. The extent of the damage from the fires is still being assessed, but the blaze has burned more than 3,300 square kilometers and jumped into parts of neighboring Oklahoma. Parts of multiple Texas counties were ordered to evacuate on Tuesday, schools were closed, and officials warned residents of potentially large property losses. Dry grass and warm temperatures on top of strong winds are fueling the blaze, making containment difficult. However, rainfall is forecast for Thursday morning. The funeral of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny, seen as the most high-profile critic of Vladimir Putin, will take place in Moscow on Friday. Navalny died suddenly in a remote Arctic prison earlier this month. Yulia Navalnaya, the widow of Alexei Navalny, announced on Wednesday the date of his funeral. However, she expressed uncertainty about whether the funeral will go smoothly as planned. After Navalny's death, dozens of his supporters were detained by the authorities when they laid flowers at various memorial sites. Navalny's associates initially wanted to hold his funeral on Thursday, but no venues were willing to host it due to Putin's scheduled annual State of the Nation address to Russia's Federal Assembly. The funeral will now take place at the Church of the Icon of the Mother of God in Moscow. Afterward, Navalny will be buried in the nearby Borisovsky Cemetery. On Wednesday, the U.S. Senate's longest-serving party leader Mitch McConnell announced his decision to leave his position as the Republican Senate leader in November. The 82-year-old Kentucky senator has held a seat in the Senate since 1985 and has served as the leader of the Senate Republican Conference since 2007. Recently, several members of his conference have demanded he step down and make way for a younger, more Trump-aligned leader. Though he will no longer be in Senate leadership, he plans to remain in Congress through the remainder of his term, which expires in 2027. There's been a breakthrough in the fight against dengue fever with British biotech company Oxitec's development of genetically modified mosquitoes to combat a surge in cases in Brazil. Brazil is currently facing a significant outbreak of the dengue virus, which is being fueled by the country's hot, rainy season. As of February 27th, over 973,000 cases of dengue have been reported this year in Brazil alone. Oxitec's mosquitoes carry a gene that kills female offspring, which can transmit diseases before they mature. According to an official from Oxitec, the mosquito population is 90% lower in areas where the company's mosquitoes have been released compared to other areas. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. We are wrapping up the month on a cloudy note, but with rain in the southern parts of the country. Jeju is seeing showers and it sure rains frequently there, while mountainous regions on the island are seeing snow with a heavy snow advisory being in place with up to 8 centimeters of snow in the forecast. Meanwhile, parts of Jeollado and Gyeongsang-Namdo province could see 1 to 5 centimeters of snow. The rest of the southern regions are having a rainy day. Well, this round of wet weather will bring spring cold. We can already feel the chill from sharp winds. Please brace for freezing conditions for the start of March. Afternoon highs are 1 to 8 degrees, lower than yesterday. Seoul and Daejeon top out at 8 degrees, but Gwangju, Daegu, Gyeongju are having breezier highs at just 7 degrees this afternoon. It will rain across Korea during the Independence Movement Day weekend, and the brief sprinkle will peak on Saturday morning before easing in the afternoon. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have for you at this hour. We'll bring you more updates from Korea and around the world at the same time next week.